Good morning. Before you let your attention wander, I want to confide in you a little secret about this university that I suspect nobody has told you during your years of study here. I am living proof that without applying to this university, without attending a single lecture, without meeting a professor, without even sitting for an examination, it's much easier to receive a degree from this mighty university than to work very hard for one. And I'm very touched indeed by the invitation that has been extended by the university, by the president, by the Koch family and foundation. And never, as a boy growing up in Wales, as the son of parents who had escaped extermination from Nazi Germany, did I imagine that one day I'd be standing, thanks to this gracious invitation, in front of some of the most talented and capable young people in Turkey at a time when the university is celebrating its 30th anniversary and at a time when tragedy is still so close to your hearts and to your thoughts. So here, unexpectedly, I find myself in one of the world's most beguiling cities to offer you some thoughts about the journey that lies ahead. Now, don't expect any words of great wisdom from me. As I grow older, I have a far keener appreciation for how little I know. Also, don't expect people like me to lead. We are too imprisoned by our past and our heritages. We won't have fresh ideas, and those will be yours. And sometimes your days will seem very long, but the seasons will be brief, and the years will be even briefer. So do one thing: squeeze the most out of every moment. All I can offer you today are a few ideas from my own journey, and I'll try to provide you with something less prescriptive than the advice I received when I was leaving high school in Wales. It was then that one of my teachers said that he had 3 vital suggestions for what would equip us boys perfectly for life. His first piece of advice was to get a short haircut. His second piece of advice was to buy a strong pair of walking boots. And his third piece of advice was to learn how to ballroom dance. But later, as I left university, in the same stage of life that you are in today, I realized that for the first time, the train tracks had suddenly ended. That passage of time when so much is prescribed by others from birth through school and more advanced studies had finished. The trucks had run out. There were no signposts. There were no landmarks. There were no milestones. At best, there were just a few breadcrumbs. So now that you've reached this point, I'll leave you with a few notes from my own journey. And the first is about dealing with rejection and failure. At every significant stage of my life, I've teetered on the edge of failure. When I left high school in Wales, I applied to Oxford. I hadn't been an especially talented schoolboy. My examination results were middling. And as a result, I was rejected by 5 Oxford colleges. And just as I was resigned to going to study elsewhere, I was summoned for an interview by one last Oxford college where I was accepted. 3 years later, when my studies at Oxford approached an end, I decided for various reasons that I wanted to go and live in America. It was impossible to get a work visa, and there was no way that I could afford to pay for college. My only route was to win a scholarship. I applied for 4 programs and was rejected by the 3 schemes that would have taken me to Harvard and to MIT and to Yale and to Stanford. But with only one option left, I got lucky and got to America. And after my 2 years in America, I again teetered on the edge of failure. I expected to return to Britain and try my hand as a journalist. I applied for the BBC and several jobs at the large British newspapers, but I was rejected by all of them. I didn't even get any interviews. I then tried my luck in America and again received nothing but rejections. And just when I thought I'd exhausted every avenue, I was finally offered a job as a junior reporter at Time magazine. It was my only offer. Later, in the early 1980s, when I started thinking about life in the venture capital business, there were just a handful of firms in Silicon Valley. They were all small, they were all staffed by white men, and I applied really to the only 6 that mattered. All of them were kind enough to meet me, all their leaders. 5 of them said, I did not have the background to succeed in the venture capital business. I was a history major. I was not an engineer. I was not a computer scientist. I'd been a journalist and therefore had never done any real work. By which they meant I hadn't worked for a Silicon Valley technology company. However, again, when failure loomed, a fellow called Don Valentine, who was the founder of Sequoia Capital, and who had started Sequoia a few years earlier, and was then managing a small $40 million fund with 4 other people, said he didn't know what made for a successful venture capitalist, and he offered me a job. I had learned one thing: never to give up. My second suggestion, for what it's worth, is not to do the obvious or feel compelled to live up to the expectations of others. The best path to follow is the one shaped by your own instincts. And most people, I suspect many of you here, will struggle with this. Some lucky people, those that discover a talent for drawing at a young age, pick up a crayon at the age of 4 or 5, and die in their 80s with a paintbrush, never have to make decisions. The same might go for somebody who's gifted with music or picked up a video camera and decided that they wanted to make movies all of their life. But for the rest of us, not blessed with unusual natural abilities, we have another challenge. We have to resist the impulse to do what is expected of us or what we feel others expect of us. My father harbored hope that after I finished studies in America, I would become a lawyer. My classmates made no secret of their horror when I chose to become a journalist. Several tried to persuade me that I was making a big mistake and should instead go to work for a large multinational firm or pursue investment banking or consulting. They said I wouldn't earn much money as a journalist, and that was the one thing they were right about. But I did follow my instincts and joined Time, and after a couple of years, I managed to get a transfer to San Francisco. And after a spell, and as a reporter there, I met the founders of many companies. One was Steve Jobs at the time that Apple was doing about $200 million a year in sales, about what it does every 4 hours this year. Another was Bill Gates, when Microsoft was doing less than $1 million a year in sales. and today it does $200 billion a year in sales. Both Steve and Bill were about my age. I was astonished. I had never met anybody in Wales who had started a company. And so I left time to write a book, and then later to start a publishing business with a partner. But after a year or so, I decided that this would always be a small business, and left. It was then that the benefits of following my instincts without a map or a guide slowly came into focus. Had I decided after Oxford to stay in Britain, I would not be standing here today. Had I not followed my desire to be a journalist, I would never have found myself in San Francisco. And had I not been in San Francisco, I would have never met Steve Jobs. And had I not met Steve Jobs, I would never have thought of helping to start a company. But more importantly, it was Steve and Apple that originally led me to Don Valentine and Sequoia, because it was Don and Sequoia who had invested in Apple's first round of venture capital. I marvel at the unexpected nature of this route, and I hope it's the unexpected route that you travel too. The Nazis, Wales, Oxford, Time, San Francisco, Steve Jobs, Apple, Sequoia, and now Istanbul. All I did was follow the breadcrumbs. Now, a different topic, and it's a few words about the importance of storytelling. I say this because unless you've studied literature, there's a very good chance that your studies in mathematics, computer science, physics, chemistry, or biology haven't dwelled on the importance and power of stories and narrative. Storytelling is vital for leadership and also investing. And unlikely though this might seem, it was studying history and my stint as a journalist that prepared me for the rest of life's journey. And here's why. Oxford's tutorial system demands that history students devote a week to composing an essay about a subject which they know nothing about. This requires reading half a dozen books, the distillation of copious and contradictory information, and then a 2,000 to 3,000 word essay in response to a single question. At Time, the challenge was the same. Usually I reported on topics which were new and for which I had a limited amount of time to sort fact from fiction. The major difference between being a history student and journalist is that for reporters, most of their subjects are alive and have lawyers. This places an onus on assessing the honesty and duplicity of a source and of thorough homework. It also develops street smarts, being able to form an opinion on imperfect information is a necessity in both. Storytelling should be a prerequisite for any manager or person who aspires to lead, or for those who want to start a company or become investors. As I acclimatized to Sequoia and the venture trade, I discovered that these habits were indispensable. I had learned, only armed with rudimentary knowledge on every topic, to form a story in my mind and convey it clearly. I had escaped the need to feel compelled to collect every piece of data before making a judgment in an unfamiliar area. Every company, every investment decision should be easy to explain to a moderately intelligent 12-year-old. And far more importantly, storytelling is perhaps the most crucial element of leadership, especially when you're trying to create something from nothing or trying to persuade people that all will be well when the world all around seems dark. Stories are expressions of imagination, and of being able to relay a dream or a compass setting. They are a picture of what might be possible. Nobody can start a business without explaining, first to themselves, where they intend to head. And thereafter, storytelling is what persuades potential employees to quit their job and join the quest. It's what convinces customers who've never heard of your business to buy your products. And eventually, a tale supported by demonstrable facts attracts other investors. The currencies with which I'm most familiar aren't dollars or euros or lira or renminbi. They're storytelling, patience, persuasion, and perseverance. The skill that I lacked, and to some extent still do, is empathy. It's not a trait I witnessed growing up, nor was it anything I associate with my early years at Sequoia. It's taken marriage to a woman whose feet are firmly on the ground, fatherhood, and years of help from a wise and gentle man, for me to even begin to develop a keener sense for the circumstances and emotions of others, and to understand my own limitations. And decades ago, as a friend told me about a walk he had taken with his 2-year-old daughter who had stopped to inspect every puddle, I knew that my reaction would have been to tug the child's hand from a desire to press ahead to do something that I considered more important. It was then that I got my first glimmer of the importance of seeing the world through the eyes of a 2-year-old, and by extension, everyone else, friends, family, colleagues, competitors. Putting others at ease and establishing trust, especially in the workplace, is the foundation for all else. Managing by instilling fear or seeking love will not help people flourish. It's better to be quietly respected. These then, in summary, are the waypoints that have steered me through life. It's also what's brought me all the way from rainy Cardiff, Wales, to sunny Istanbul, Turkey. And it's also why just below the signature on my email, I have a little three-word reminder for myself and for others. And this is the reminder that I will finish with, and I will leave you all with today. My little message on my email has 3 words. They say, anything is possible.